People tell you what they're like within the first few minutes of meeting them. I'm going to argue within the first few seconds of meeting them. But the question is, are you listening? Because I have not been listening, and I'm not even just talking about the past or the recent past. I'm talking about tonight. Well, by the time you see this video, it's going to be the next day, but I just went on a coffee date. I don't know if that's the correct word to call it, but I don't even want to like name it a date because it was so jarring to my nervous system. And the worst part is that I wasn't surprised. I mean, I was surprised to the extent that it went, but my nervous system was telling me from the moment that I met this guy and he opened his mouth and was talking that this is probably not a good use of my time. He seemed like a nice enough guy, and that is like part of the problem because I have had a tendency in the past to think like, well, nice means that there's no harm in trying, but a nice guy is not the same as a good guy. And this goes for men and women. So any of you out there who are, in relationships or dating women, like it's the same thing. I don't think that every person that is nice, like in terms of just polite or whatever to your face in that moment, is necessarily a good person for you. Let me explain. So when I met this guy, it was downstairs in the apartment that I'm in. He doesn't live here, but he was delivering something. And I had just come from a situation where I felt like somebody was following me outside. I mean, he was following me, this other guy, not the guy I'm talking about, but and the guy who was following me made me feel really uncomfortable and actually said something to me really disgusting. And I kind of, now that I think about it, I yelled at this guy to leave me alone. And the guy, like, kind of sunk away and left. But I felt like when I was walking home after that, that he was still a bit behind me. And so I just came to my bottom of my apartment. Like, I came into my apartment, put away my things, and then I went back downstairs and wanted to see if this guy was like lurking outside my apartment because I saw him continuing to come behind me, but not right behind me. Like he stayed distant. I didn't see anyone there when I went to my apartment, but when I went, so I was really grateful. But when I went back upstairs, I was about to go upstairs and the elevator doors opened. And out came this other guy who was delivering something. And so in us talking and him, venting about his day or his night, because it was later at night, that's why I felt unsafe with this other guy following me. I think I projected this idea that, well, this guy who's talking to me now, the delivery guy, seemed really empathetic to my situation. I didn't even complain about it in the beginning, but he was complaining so much about his day, and I just thought he was having a bad night. So it put me in a bit of complaining mode, and then I said something about the guy following me, and then this guy that was delivering something said, it would be great to like carry on our conversation, and it would be nice to get to know you. He's like, oh, but maybe you're married or something. And then I said, yeah, I would be up for it. And so he took down my number, but in that little bit of time, I feel like I should have just been grateful that the universe got me home safe and that the guy who I felt like I knew he was following me, then just didn't come to my door and left, and that this other person was there. Like, I should have just left it at that. But somewhere, now that I think about it, I even said to the delivery guy, like, maybe this worked out, if it wasn't for the guy that was like kind of following me, like I wouldn't have come back downstairs and wouldn't have met you. So it was a nice surprise or something like that. But I was projecting because really the delivery guy was quite negative. Like the way he was talking about people. He wasn't just complaining about his night. He was talking about all the drivers and the way that Vancouver is and Vancouverites, and that's what they call people from Vancouver where I'm from. And just the way he was talking about people and life in general. It's like, imagine all the stuff that I say to you guys where I twist things around to like always see the beauty and the magic in even something that goes wrong. Imagine someone speaking the complete opposite. Like always seeing the negative, always seeing, generalizing about people and places. And I know that's a lot to interpret from a few minutes, but honestly, in the first few minutes, if I really had taken a moment to think about it, that is what I got from this guy. I got a feeling that he was interested, and he asked for my number and he seemed excited about like that I didn't say, oh, I'm married or whatever. But that was not my thing to, like, my role was to think about, am I interested in actually going out with this person? I think because I had nothing in particular going on with me and someone right now. And because I was in the state of a bit of fear, like coming home and stuff, it seemed like something to do, which I'm really embarrassed by now. Because he messaged me today and then he called me. Or he called me yesterday. I can't remember the timeline of things, but today we decided that we were going to go for coffee. And I remember feeling when he called me, like I really liked that he called me. But the phone call was really disappointing because the phone call was a continuation of complaining. And I remember in the middle of his complaining, I laughed. I tried to make it a joke and I said, I don't know how I worded it, but I kind of said, like I did my infamous like eternal optimist kind of talk, and it seemed to shut him up for a moment, but then he went back to complaining. And I was like, this is not just him having a bad night the night that I met him. This is like the way that he is. And even yesterday, when we had decided that, so the timeline of this is a bit crazy, but the first day we met, then the next day he texted me, and then the following day we went out for coffee. I already could feel that this is not a good idea. Like, there were parts of me that were thinking, like, why would you put your time into someone? Like, you're going to have to lift this person up. He's going to bring you down, and all the things energetically that you are, Tasleem, that you've created and manifested and all this stuff, it's like this heavy weight. And in the past, I have tried to make people more optimistic and tried to help them and change them, and like change them. I don't know if you could say, like I was going to say very, it sounds bad, but for the better, but that's not, I know that that's actually quite conceited for me to say, because who am I to say that, being my way is better? Like every person should have their own way of being. But I knew instinctively that this person is, their way of being does not match my way of being, and it's going to be a disaster. I just didn't know how much of a disaster it was until I decided to be nice, because I had agreed to meet today for coffee, that I would go for coffee. So I messaged him and I told him that I would confirm with him, like we'd figure out a time. We did. I had suggested a few places around my place, and then he said, well, why don't, but I also, it's a rainy day, it was cold. So yeah, inside I would have loved it if someone just came and picked me up. And he had a plan and we went there. He didn't have a plan, but he did offer to come and pick me up and we could find something together. I didn't feel unsafe with him, like he would hurt me or it would be dangerous, like physically or anything, like to get into his car or anything like that. But I wasn't listening to the voice that already would, like, knew what he was going to be like. And when we were driving to the coffee shop, the places that I suggested, because he was coming from kind of far, he didn't necessarily go with, but he was wanting to go a bit closer to where he had come from. And I was like, there's no point to that. You came all the way here. We might as well go somewhere around this area. And whenever he couldn't find parking or something like that, he would get angry and complain about the people. And then the part that I hate is I'm not good around people that complain about different cultures, the way they drive or how they, like, I don't like generalization, stereotypes. It really bothers me, and I could not be around someone that thinks like that, like constantly. I let it go on the drive there because he's driving. I don't want to be distracting and whatever. And now I'm in this guy's car. He didn't want to pay for parking, like on the street or whatever. And I have trouble walking. Like, there were so many things, but I just let him do his thing. And I thought maybe when we're sitting, it would be okay. But I have mentioned in previous videos that when something is not going right, that is the best time to see what someone's really like. And what he was like when things were not going right, like he couldn't find parking or he wasn't, like, where he wanted to go wasn't working out or whatever, he was not kind to me. He was not kind about other people. He was complaining. It was really uncomfortable. When we got to the coffee shop, it wasn't the one that he wanted to go to. It wasn't the one I wanted to go to, but I was like, hey, this, there's parking, there's whatever. I mean, we walked from a far away. He put out his arm so I could hold on to him to walk. There were some things that might have been okay. He paid for like a muffin and a drink. When we sat down, it was kind of asking me questions, but asking me questions to later use my responses to dig at me. So I wasn't responding about things. Like, I felt like he was asking kind of personal, like 2 personal questions, things that you wouldn't ask someone when you first are getting to know them. And it wasn't fun. Like, it wasn't a fun kind of conversation. So I was trying to change it to something different. He was asking me about like where I'm wanting to rent, but then it got into like cost and rent and pricing and like him complaining that people are paying so much for these apartments now, and what kind of jobs do they have that they can pay for that. And I was like thinking, man, like, who cares? If they want to pay for it, like, let them. And then he said something like, you know, when you tell someone to change, they should change. And I was like, what? And I'm like, they should change? And he goes, and I was pretty proud of myself because the old Tasleem would not be like this. And he was like, yeah, like, if you tell them over and over again, they need to change, like they should change. And then he told me about his area and maybe I should consider moving to his area. But then he said, but just so you know, there's a lot of these kind of people there. Like he named a certain culture. I just lost it. I was like, I would never be worried about that. He misunderstood and thought I was agreeing with him. And I was like, no, no, no. I'm saying that I would never say something like that. Like you would never find me saying, oh, I'm not going to that area to live because of that culture. Like it's not even culture, it's just a complete stereotype. And he's like, well, it's true. It's like when I park here and when I do this, they always take my parking spot. And I don't know. He just went off and he noticed that when he would ask me questions that I felt really like, he's like, did you ever have you considered applying for this and doing that? And I'm like, I got it covered. I'm good. Like, I'm not worried about it. I'm a manifester. Like, I'm not in that energy of like worry. And he's like, well, I prepare things at least 6 months in advance and I do my research. And I'm like, good for you. Like, that's not how I'm even able to do things right now. I don't have 6 months. But besides that, I didn't think it was appropriate for me to be answering the kind of questions that, like, you don't need to know my finances or my like, I just met you and I'm not looking for you to solve all my problems. And so then he went into his problems about his family members who have had addictions or passed away, or it was so uncomfortable. And he just kept talking because I wasn't talking about myself. Because I'm like, the things that we're talking about right now are not appropriate for you to even ask me. And I shouldn't, this is not fun, like dating. I just did a video on how life is supposed to be fun. Well, dating is like the thing that should be the most fun. And this is like the complete opposite of fun. And then, so he just kept talking about himself at a certain point and his life and what he's gone through because of all the people that have screwed up and that they should change. And he just kept talking because I wasn't. And then I said, I'm going to stop you for a second. He was like, what? I said, I'm going to be really honest. I'm feeling really uncomfortable right now. And he said, okay, well, yeah, of course. Like, you've probably done this a lot, like a lot of times. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And he said, well, you think you're so great. And he looked me right in my face. Like, this is a big guy, like tall, big build. Like, I'm not saying muscular, but just like a big guy. And he's like right in my face. And he says, you think you're so great. And I was like, what the I was thinking, who speaks to a woman like this? Like, who? This was so far from what I expected, but at the same time, visions of the moment I met him and when he started talking when I met him came to my mind. And all those moments where I was like hearing this voice saying, Tasleem, do not say yes about the phone number. Do not go on a date. You are still allowed to say, actually, I'm not feeling this about the date. I'm gonna pass on it. I was so aware that I already knew within the first few minutes of meeting this guy. I already knew what made me continue. Maybe because I didn't have another date or something going on. Maybe because I'm a glutton for punishment. Maybe the conceited part of me thought that I could somehow like see the good in him or get him to see this, like change his pessimism because I'm the eternal optimist and I'll rub off on him. But that did not happen. And he kept going right up to my face and saying these horrible, horrible things to me. And then I said, you can leave now. Like, I don't, he goes, do you want me to give you a ride home? Like he said in a very, I'm saying that, I'm not saying that right. The way he said it, it was very like, well, obviously you have no way of getting home now. Like, he could see that I had trouble walking. I'm not close to my home at all. And he said, well, do you want to give me a ride? Do you want me to give you a ride? Like, he expected me to say yes because I had no other way. I said, no, thank you. And then he kept talking to me about how I need to, he said, you should look in the mirror. You're not that great, or something like that. And I said, oh, I do look in the mirror and she's pretty fine. Like I said, she's beautiful. But all the while, I was so shaky. I wasn't scared of him. I was scared that there are people like that out there in the world and that I attracted that. And I was very upset at myself because I already knew this was not the right thing. He wouldn't leave me alone, and we were sitting in the coffee shop, and I yelled this like yell that came from deep within. Like it was a sound that I don't usually make. I only remember like yelling like this in situations where I was like really desperate and needing help, and it hurt my throat. My throat still hurts. And other people looked at us and I didn't care. And then he finally left and I'm here. So I'm here to say that people tell us who they are within the first few minutes of being around them, but we need to make space to listen. Listen, listen. Oh my God, thank you for listening to me. I was like, I need my YouTube peeps to like tell this story to because I feel shaky. Like my throat still hurts from my scream, but also like just having sat there and taken that all in for that long without being able to say anything and then finally saying it. But yeah, listen to what your intuition tells you because it knows. It really does. Thanks for listening.